amazing. She's bright, and I'm really looking forward to diving into some of the things with you. So thank you so much, Jasmine, for jumping on and sharing your expertise, especially since you mainly deal with Black and Brown clients. So it's really going to be great to kind of hear your tips and your background on what you went through. So I'll say, let's start off with, you've accomplished a lot already. And what led you to pursue your PhD? And kind of what was some of the hoops or things you went through as a Latina pursuing your PhD?
Well, first and foremost,
you are going through right now, currently.
First and foremost, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you both and talk a little bit about my experience. I am humbly going to do my best to try and answer what you are discussing as some of my accomplishments. So to start, to answer your immediate first question, in what led me to pursue my PhD, going for my master's was where I thought things were going to be, capped at. I thought, okay, I have my master's. And then after I was licensed, I was like, okay, I really made it. Like, I'm done, I'm good. And you mentioned a credential. It's an approved clinical supervisor. So as I learned more about these different credentials and I learned more in the field about why are they important? We hear about them, we understand them, but why are they important? Particularly a PhD. So moving past, I'm sure your audience is familiar with the term imposter syndrome. That was something that I never viewed myself. If you would have said to me when I was younger, you're going to be going for your PhD, I would have been like, what? No. So I realized very quickly in the field, particularly in white fields like counseling, it's really hard to see professors or people who are doing this work that look like you. You being a person of Latina, Latino, Black, Indigenous people of color, so Black or brown people. Because most positions of power, whether they're supervisors, they have a private practice, they are directors of a for-profit or nonprofit agency, or are a professor in universities teaching these theories, and I intentionally put theories in quotes, that are very westernized, they're white people. So as I started to get a little bit more invested in understanding what type of quality treatment these communities needed, I realized very quickly I needed more information, and I wasn't going to be able to deliver the quality that I wanted my community to have by just being licensed and by only having a master's. So I pushed further to get that PhD because I knew that if I were to get this PhD, I would be ideally, through our capitalist lens and what we are told, I would be receiving the highest of the highest degrees. And therefore, by default, I would be able to offer my clients the highest quality service, at least in my eyes. I quickly started to realize that a lot of what I needed to do was decolonize my understanding of what therapy was. So I started to look at critical race epistemologies. I started to look into theories that were focused and giving people of color the title of holders and creators of knowledge. So I really started to intentionally dismantle what I had understood, which would have never happened at the master's level. I really started to dismantle what was given to me, and I really started to identify and understand what my community needs. So me being Latina was really that driving factor that allowed for me to see, okay, how am I seeing myself, my communities, my own experiences modeled to me? Are they deficit-based? Or are they talking about things that are empowering us to use our own wealth that we have in our communities to heal?
Wow, thank you for that. You mentioned something, what I'm picking up, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but during your studies, you're critical of like the academic space, or just even the medical profession when it comes to therapy and psychology, specifically when it comes to Black and brown communities, because you mentioned colonialization. We've been othered in these spaces since the beginning of time, right? So being that you're currently a PhD student, you've done your master's, and me being a professor and kind of knowing that interaction between student and lecturer or professor, how do you, or do you actually challenge some of the work that's presented to you, some of the lectures that are given to you? Do you challenge it in person, or do you kind of wait? Are you more so your strategy trying to internalize the information, and then when you actually get onto the field, then you can put your own spin on it, for lack of a better word?
That is an excellent question. So I would say both happened. So now that I'm a doctoral candidate, that means I'm focusing on writing. So I'm consistently evaluating the research that is coming across my screen. I'm consistently evaluating what I'm being, because a lot of people will share and say things that seemingly are like, oh, this could apply, or this makes sense. But I've had many conversations with researchers who are people of color, and we talk about there really aren't many of us. And so when you see work that's being done, we're either left out, or when we are being talked about, the scholars that are talking about us aren't people who look like us. So I'm consistently looking through a critical lens, much more now, and I have much more confidence to challenge that outright. Now, when I first started in my PhD program, that imposter syndrome I talked about, I was really trying to understand and get a sense of what all of this meant to me, and also get a sense of how I viewed myself in addition to what I was learning. And as I started to teach and have particular courses where I was having master's students that I'm supervising and I'm also teaching them, I started to also intentionally make them uncomfortable by talking about how counseling has been colonized. And what that means is there's a lot of white values, a lot of white heteronormative experiences that are centered as the perspective, the theories, the theologies of how we look at even counseling and what skills or tools we should be applying. That is what's taught. So I intentionally have those conversations with my students and with myself and with colleagues to say, how are we incorporating what's happening in our communities? What does that look like? And what is of value in those communities that we are overlooking, whether by way of how we talk about even the word therapy or counseling, or how we talk about access, who has access to therapy. So I'm actively having these uncomfortable conversations, and these are just like those small, minute parts, not the bigger, heavy topics, not only in personal spaces and collegial spaces, but also on my websites, in the work that I'm doing, and in the audience I'm trying to reach. So I'm much more confident now than I was when I was first trying to understand this.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I actually forgot to mention that you're now the CEO. You own your own practice, right? You own your own private practice. So congratulations on that. That's amazing. And I know there's several things. I'm going to come back to that later, or maybe Julius will get into that. And it's called TN Therapy, tntherapyllc.com. We'll put that link below for everyone. But I want to talk about loss and how to deal with loss, especially everything that's going on with COVID. People have lost their jobs, their finances, and some life. And I know for you, I told Julius this morning, and I told you also, I started doing some futures trading. I've been doing futures trading, right? And I was having a really good 2 weeks / month. And I was like, okay, I'm getting there. My account, I started off with 5,000. I got up to, this morning, I was up to 6,600. It was smaller wins, but I was getting there, and I saw a very big move. And long story short, I got greedy and lost $1,562 in the span of less than a minute today. So that was a big punch. And was trying not to spiral, trying how to figure out mentally what can I learn from it, and not, especially I think especially with finances in the Black and Brown community, certain things can feel a lot harder because you're like, how are you going to climb out of this hole, right? So in terms of whether it's about finances, whether it's about loved ones, what would you say are some best practices when dealing with loss? Like for me, what I try to do, I try to walk it off a little bit, but it was too cold, so I didn't actually leave my house. But what would you say are some best practices?
So I'm going to try and address that with a general, what would I say, and then a little bit more specific to what you just shared. Now, when I hear the term loss, I think that we need to kind of zoom out a little bit, because that word can be applied to many things. So we could say loss is relative to death. Loss is relative to the experiences that we've anticipated or consistently had, whether by way of the weather, whether by way of having access to being outside, loved ones, loss being maybe there's a relationship that recently ended, loss being maybe there's an identity I've had for a while and suddenly that's shifting, whether through my finances, whether through weight, whether through appearances. Maybe somebody is experiencing a loss in many regards. So loss can be a general umbrella term. So understanding that depending on what that loss looks like, there are going to be levels to it. So there may be a severe loss, like maybe you just had, maybe you just lost a pregnancy, or maybe you just lost a loved one, versus some smaller, not to say they're less important, but some smaller level types of losses. Like perhaps today felt like a very big loss to you. For someone else, that may feel a little less. So understanding that that's important to kind of get a sense of how immediate is this loss and how pertinent is that to your life, your lifestyle, and the daily activities around you. So that would be the first lens I would want to kind of conceptualize through. Now, going more specifically with what you shared, if I'm thinking and I have a client who's like, today was a really hard day or it was a tough morning, I first want to validate the fact that you did something really well. You acknowledged, wow, I felt that there was a loss. So you weren't avoiding it. There wasn't denial. You weren't running away from that. You can identify it. And that's always a good step, because that means that somebody is recognizing there is something happening that's incongruent for them. And so then you go on to say, this is the amount. And I really quickly tried to assess, was this something like, what was the lesson I could take from this? I think that's valuable for many reasons. So first and foremost being, I hear that you're trying to work on discipline. I think you may have mentioned you got greedy for a moment, but I think I'm hearing you try and work on discipline. And so I would talk about that with my client. I might say, all right, let's talk about discipline. What might be some strategies of how to minimize these losses? And or similarly, how do you celebrate? I think we need to start to be a little bit more open with the idea of failing. So where we have big wins, we're going to have some losses, right? We don't live in a world where it's constantly this. Sometimes we're going to have this. Sometimes some people have this. So you may see that that looks different for different folks. And I think what's really important is particularly finding what works for one person. So being able to say, Achumboro, you are right now experiencing a sense of loss. Let's talk about how you are celebrating the fact that you were able to, one, identify it, two, quickly start to say, okay, I don't want to experience this, and this may be something I have to be more disciplined about. And let's also celebrate the fact that, okay, that was a loss, but it didn't break you. Let's really celebrate the fact that you did push past and roll through with resistance this minor failure. And let's embrace that. Let's recognize, okay, let's talk about what it taught you. So I think when we're looking at loss, even if we're applying it to different circumstances, we need to be more comfortable with the idea of loss, because it's expected, especially in our lives. We're not going to consistently be winning. It's not reality. Without loss, there would be no moments of us to be able to celebrate victory, compassion, and good things going on. So we would really first, I would recommend, let's spend time with what your understanding is of loss. And then let's embrace it a bit and talk about how we allow for that to serve us moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And so kind of, I want to say, kind of piggyback off of that. We were talking about finances and financial struggle. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday about six-figure salaries, which seems to be a pinpoint in on Black Twitter, Black social media. I've been hearing for years. People say, "Hey, listen, I won't date somebody that's not making six figures. I don't feel like I'm ready to date unless somebody makes six figures." Mm-hmm. And it seems to be this thing. It's tied with value, happiness. And I remember you mentioned earlier, we're living in a capitalistic society, right? So, and we all know money is important. This is entrepreneurship / financial literacy centered YouTube page. But as somebody that works in the mental health world and works in therapy, how do you guide people who feel that their sense of self-worth is tied to either their salary, or you can even apply that to maybe even younger kids who maybe feel like the materialistic, whether it be clothing or maybe certain video games or smartphones. How would you advise somebody to navigate a world where so much of our sense of self-worth applies to these external materialistic things?
That is a wonderful question, Julius. And I think I'm going to try and go at it in two directions, because if I think about someone who's an adult, I'm perceiving what I would work through very differently than I would for an adolescent. So I'll start with the adult. I think that part of what I want to be clear about when we think about a part of our identity is class. The other isms that are here is spirituality, religion. How are we making sense of and connecting with those around us? So we have human needs that we all strive to meet. And if you're only stuck in one of them being, I financially need to be making a certain amount of money, then that tells me that you're stuck more in certainty. You need to have a sense of what that's going to look like. It's really uncomfortable for you to be in uncertainty. And then I want to focus on, okay, well, is there a significance you experience in being the person who has X amount of dollars, particularly a 6-figure salary? What does that come with when we think about your identity? Does that make you feel financially stable? Does that make you feel powerful? Does that make you feel in control? So I'm going to be paying attention to what values adults are really striving to meet with this particular 6-figure salary. But then I think the bigger component is looking at growth, looking at compassion, understanding the idea of how are we connecting beyond just these personality parts of what finances can offer us. So an idea would be understanding what we're seeing modeled to us in our society around us. So those who may be rich, those who may be looking like they have the world because financially they can afford much and so much, right? I'm seeing that there's still a lot of people, Black and brown as well, and even white celebrities, that even though financially they're doing really well, you're seeing things destroyed around them, relationships, health, even the way that they are living. They may financially be able to afford a lot, but they don't seem very happy. So why is that? Clearly money doesn't answer it all. So there's a proverb that says, I'd rather have bread and be somewhere sitting and having, in peace than have a huge buffet and all this around me and it be in chaos. And I think that is really important to tie into this, because if we're looking as money to be the only factor that's making us happy, you're missing a whole lot more. So we've got growth and we've got contribution. How am I growing? If I'm interested in making 6 figures, well, okay, great, wonderful. What am I doing with that? How am I contributing to something bigger than me? How am I contributing to society, my community, people I care about? So connection and love is really important. And if I'm only using finances as a way to pursue things or to pursue what I perceive will fill me, I'm missing a lot of more important needs. So that's for the adults. Then for the adolescents, I think it's really important to start to look at what's modeled around them. So are they receiving things by way of support, care, concern, or are they looking for this financial aspect to fill other voids? Because maybe mom and dad are working a few different jobs, or maybe they don't have a particular person who can be of support to them. And therefore that significance is screaming. And usually developmentally, that's what you're going to see is adolescents want to be significant, particularly in a world where everything you're seeing is instant gratification. So they're really not learning early on the idea of grounding, or the idea of even understanding, hey, let's talk about like, what do you want to give back to somebody? Let's not even identify the fact that the new iPhone 12 just came out. Let's talk about you have a food, you have a house, you have, and this is assuming some of us do, right? You have X, Y, and Z. Let's talk about gratitude, and let's go talk about some of those that may not have that, and let's go give back a bit. We're focused so much on just one part of those needs that adolescents might be growing up thinking this is the only way I can confirm I've arrived, or this is the only way I can confirm and validate for myself I'm doing well. So we really want to be intentional about modeling and giving adolescents in particular, because those are the adults of our future, more tools and deeper roots of knowledge, so that they aren't just turning to Twitter or Instagram to see what's modeled and conditioned through a capitalist lens of what they perceive to be success.
Wow. Great question, Julius, and great answer, Jasmine. I would love to dive into that even a bit more, because whether it's parents or students who may be watching this themselves, I think if we can dive into a bit of tools that we can give in order to help students cope or find themselves in this world, what would you say some things we should focus? I know one you spoke of was gratitude, but are there any other tips or tools that we can use for the students we interact with, but also for their parents to know, okay, this is how I can better relate to my child who's going through this?
Yeah. So I'm not sure that I have a one way to make that happen, but I do have some things that come to mind. And particularly when I think about my own identity. And I really talk about that a lot with clients, and that's a lens that I consistently bring in is how is our identity being validated? Because when we are looking for something, essentially that says to me, you might be looking for connection, a sense of belonging. And it's really hard to find that in spaces that are going to be predominantly white or predominantly of a particular class where maybe you're not finding that relates to you. So I think I said this earlier, there's a bunch of wealth in our community that we are looking past or that is generally looked past. So I think, for instance, if I'm going to have a conversation with my nieces, right? I want for them to know the value of their culture. I want for them to know the value of being a young lady. And that is how they identify. I want for them to know the value of what it looks like to see stories, history that is of them, because they're not getting that. So when we're looking at these ideas of, well, I want the new this, or I want the new that, or I want to be able to have the same thing that so-and-so down the street has, or that so-and-so up the block or in school has, we're really missing being able to help them identify what's rich in our community, whether that means the stories we have, whether that means the activities that we do, whether that means revisiting some of our histories and saying, hey, you know, let's talk about some things we did when I was younger, and let's talk a little bit about the things that maybe we're not viewing or not celebrating as much. So everything right now is screen time, getting off of screen time and being able to see, what did we used to do to connect when we were younger? We played board games, we ran outside, granted it's a little cold, so layer up. We had a sense of community because we knew one another. So even being able to kind of with socially distance, learning what are the wealth and what are the riches in our community that we're not seeing. And also being able to, and this is, I'm identifying there's some privilege in here, if you can, being able to travel to a particular space of your country of origin. So that means if I'm Puerto Rican and Colombian, have I got to visit Colombia? Have I got to visit Puerto Rico? If I'm, able to visit other countries and learn from other cultures, there's a richness in seeing how others live with very different resources. There's a richness in being able to see what is valuable in other cultures compared to what we're seeing in this Western American capitalist society that's conditioning our young Black and brown kids to think one identity or one experience is the norm. And that's not true.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Julius, before you go, I had something to add. I think that is so significant in terms of going back and to your homeland or the land of your ancestors. I think we spoke a mutual friend we have, Henry. He's from Ghana as well. I haven't been able to go back to Ghana, but 2 or 3 years ago, I was in the south of Spain and I took the ferry across to go back to Morocco. So it was my first time back on the continent of Africa in 20 plus years, 25 plus years. And me just setting foot on the land, I felt recharged. I can't explain it, as both of you know, I'm not into like energies and things like that. That's not me. But I definitely felt recharged just by setting foot on, and that's something I didn't plan to experience or anything. So definitely I recommend if anybody can go back to their home land or even home continent, because the continent worked for me since I was several countries away. But that's something, that's really something that can be helpful. On to you, Julius. Or Jasmine, if you have a rebuttal.
Just to interject, I'm sorry to interrupt. A quick little, again, I said earlier, this might be of something to do with privilege, but a quick little cheat way of doing that is interactives. So I know I said screen time would be ideally to avoid, but if you really can't get out or there's limitations by way of health or things that are happening around us, interactive ways. So there's lots of YouTubes you can be looking at, or there's lots of videos you can find that are respective to a particular country or culture that can really help immerse. Maybe we say, okay, I'm going to bring out an old recipe, or maybe we say, I don't know any recipes. Let me go in and find one. Really immersing yourself in a particular identity or culture that maybe isn't being validated or modeled or discussed or recognized or valued in what you're seeing around us in a more Western notion. Thanks for letting me interrupt, Julius.
Oh, no worries, no worries. I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. So we all know like this past year has been just, I don't even know, it's been a impactful year, just to say the least, of 2020, with just the sheer amount of changes that the world had to go through. And impacts of COVID-19 and et cetera, or even just speaking about some of the uprisings that had happened in regards to the racial inequities and police violence and things of that nature. But, we as Uplift Communities, we were able to navigate the waters, and we had a tough time, but we were able to kind of find some success throughout the year with some of our endeavors. You launched your own practice during COVID-19. So what led to that? Was that a decision I guess I would say impacted by COVID-19, or was that something that you're probably thinking about doing before the shutdown, and it just kind of, gave you that extra push?
Thank you. That question is going to bring me to a more personal narrative and story, but I'm happy to share it because I think that it's relative to what we're talking about. I was working already at another private practice, and at that private practice, I was working with people who are in a different class. So we're looking at a more upper class, predominantly white clientele. And at that time, and I've always seen this disparity when I'm working with clients who are people of color and who are coming from a working class background, or people who are people of color and are coming from an upper class background. Anytime I'm looking at the experiences they're having, it is very much around a system that is inherently designed to suppress them or oppress them. And when I'm looking at clients who have many privileges in many ways that are experiencing a frustration with individualized circumstances, but inherently have a wealth of resources available to them, I found myself as a Latina struggling with where I was really giving my services to. I found myself frustrated with the fact that a majority of my clients who have access to me don't look like me. And I can appreciate working with that clientele, and I can appreciate being able to serve and offer support in general. But my passion, my heart, I really struggled with not being able to do and serve my own community the way I wanted to. So in that, I've recognized that a lot of Black, Indigenous people of color who may be counselors, there aren't a lot of us, but those that there are, we're particularly working in communities, spaces or orgs or practices that are serving a majority of people who don't look like us. So it got me thinking, and it got me thinking even further than that experience to say, who are the people doing the work that look like me? And so that got me thinking, and I started to join networks that I saw there were therapy for Latinx, and I started to join therapy for people of color. And I started to see other providers who looked like me. And then that got me even more excited because I started to think, all right, I know that the clients who are with me love working with me, but I started to feel more fulfilled when I had the few clients who were people of color or Black or brown. And I saw just how valuable it was to them that we were working together. And that was what drove me. I was teaching, I was in the beginning parts of defending myself for my comprehensive exam to begin writing my dissertation. And then I was seeing clients in a private practice that wasn't mine at the time. So I had a lot happening on my plate. And majority of people would say, Jasmine, you're doing way too much. You need to start to cut some things down. And thankfully, I had the support around me and the guidance of people to say, really pay attention and take inventory to what's fueling you. And I realized that when I was working with people in my community, I didn't even feel like it was work. So it pushed me. And when COVID first hit, I was talking to Achumboro and I was saying, I would really love to start my own practice, and I'm a little hesitant. I don't know if this is the right time. And we were having these conversations and dialoguing about it. And he was like, well, do you have a name? And I was like, yeah, I've had a name. Like I have a name. I have some ideas for a podcast. I've been writing down a list of things I would do. And he was like, so then you've got everything you need. And I was like, what? No, I don't like, again, this imposter syndrome is setting in. I'm thinking I have to have the works. I'm thinking I have to have I need a business plan. I need to have a certain amount of money. And I think I was just looking for excuses because I was fearful that I was about to take this plunge. So I said, you know what? Anything I'm already doing for someone else, I could do for myself. And anything I'm already doing that is allowing for me to serve, I'm going to follow my faith and know that what's meant to be is mine. I have to go and claim it. So I'm going to put in, this LLC. I've got the name that I've been sitting with, and I went with Tea and Therapy. It's been a name that I've had in my heart since about 2015, and just didn't really know how I wanted to use it yet. But the reason I even said decolonizing therapy when we're thinking about the word counseling, it's a Western notion. We've been having, particularly in Latino communities, a comunidad. We've had testimonios. These are all forms of narrative, of storytelling, of healing, of sharing with one another. So I thought in Black and Brown communities, we're constantly spilling the tea. We'll be like, yo, let me tell you, or I gotta let you know. Like, we get hyped sometimes. Or then we're like, oh, I gotta share some tea with you. Like, we're usually speaking very authentically with people we trust. So I came up with the idea of tea and therapy because I thought, well, if you spill the tea, I'll bring the therapy. And together we will do tea and therapy. So when I started that and the LLC got approved, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to be virtual only right now because there's no reason to put extra things on my plate that don't need to be at this time. So a majority of my clients at the time wanted to come with me. And I really wanted to be intentional about honoring spaces for Black and Brown folks. So I started off with the intent of wanting to do something that I felt passionate about, and I've continued and I'm working towards growing and expanding that. So now looking to hire somebody, have interns, because I want to reach those also that aren't able to afford counseling. So I want to be able to supervise those who are quality master's level so that they can be working and have access to therapy. So a lot of it came from just hearing myself, taking inventory of my passion, my needs, consulting with those I love, and being able to take that leap during a time that I think a lot of other people were experiencing fear as well.
Thank you. Tea and therapy. I like that. Thank you.
I like that too. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. So I'm going to switch and continue up on this, I guess, upbeat path. And you said something about celebrating, right? How, especially in Black communities, how can we practice celebrating or taking space or being intentional about having a good time? I forget, there's a specific term. Treating yourself, I forget the term, but what are some tips you would have around that? I know you tell me to do that all the time. I don't necessarily do it, but at least we can reflect on this, and hopefully other people will be better than me with doing this and taking up your advice.
I will give a few recommendations. When I think about the term taking up space, and I consistently am telling my clients to do that. So the idea of taking up space means finding something that feels good for you, that you allow yourself to experience authentically without guilt. And that may be difficult at first. So a really good example, I have one client, it's their birthday coming up and they were really excited. They just went for a Ph.D. Black woman, she's in education, and we were hyped. We were like, yes, this is amazing. And my client's talking about wanting to celebrate their birthday. And the thought that they had in mind was, I would love to go to, the Standard, this huge, have this huge window and be overlooking the balcony and be just soaking in the tub, this huge oversized soaking tub. And we were having this conversation, and they were struggling with the idea of it because financially it's committing to spending some money. And we were talking about the idea of treat yourself, right? Like, don't treat yourself beyond your means, but financially you're able to do this. So let's talk about the notion of feeling the sense of guilt. And let's talk about the scarcity mentality and how sometimes we are in this mindset as people of color that it's bad for us to spend money. On the flip side, we might be spending too much of it and we treat ourselves way too much, in ways that we need to really be reining in and finding balance. But in particular with this client, we really had to reconcile their frustrations or their guilt with spending this amount of money and looking at, well, first and foremost, let's talk about celebrating, right? You just got into a PhD program. Let's talk about celebrating the fact that you also have been doing well at work this year during a time where a lot of us are, we're just trying to show up. So let's really celebrate the fact that this has been tough. And it's not like you're going to be going and doing this every weekend, right? You're not going to fancy hotels and you're not trying to spend this amount of money consistently. So let's recognize we're going to associate meanings with what we invest in, whether that is a elaborate just evening for yourself and being able to rest and relax and have this idea of relaxation and celebration in that capacity, or whether we're like, there's a particular experience I've been wanting to have. So I don't have TikTok, so disclaimer on this, but I had another client say to me, yeah, there is a TikTok challenge going around where folks go to a restaurant for to get on appetizers, and another one for their main entree, and then they go to another restaurant to get a dessert, and they're not dining inside, so they get to dine in their car and they get to kind of sample and have the smorgasbord of different spaces. So again, right, like being able to find what's in your means and being able to celebrate in ways that are going to be safe, in ways that are going to be comfortable for you, in ways that are going to honor you. So for one client, it was, I want to relax and soak. For another one, it was, I want to have a really great meal. For another one, it might be being able to say, what do I need to do for myself? Maybe I need to have something done for me. Maybe there's something I've been putting a lot of energy into, and I would like for somebody to take care of that, or I would like for somebody to offer some recommendations and help support me in offloading some of that. So we need to find what's specific for us in our celebration, because my idea of celebration could look very different for you, Julius, could look very different for you, Achumboro. So finding first what that means to us. Secondly, being able to be excited about the meaning we're going to do with what we're committing to. And then third, being able to plan for that, even if it means I can't do it right now.
I like that. I definitely like that. Thank you. Always good to treat yourself. I try to do the same, whatever that means in this current quarantine hybrid world. So another conversation that I was having a couple of days ago with someone, with a friend, and we were discussing family life, right? We were discussing, in particular, and I know the conversation's kind of been, throughout has been around money and finances and things of that nature. In the Black and Brown community, where not all the time, but oftentimes resources can be scarce when it comes to money and things of that nature, right? And oftentimes, if you, especially I know, Achumboro and I, and children of single mothers, and specifically immigrants, single mothers, right? There could be this. Could be said, but there's a pressure, internal pressure, to feel that you need to provide and you need to have provide resources, and these things can, and I've seen these play out through different friends and family members, but as a therapist, as a counselor, somebody who's seen different clients, how would you advise like setting maybe certain boundaries with family when it comes to finances, when it comes to money? Because one of my friends was saying, he's traveling, he's doing the different things, but he's traveling for work specifically. He's taking care of business. But anytime he talks to his family members, they're like, "Oh, wait, where you going?" And I just asked you for a couple $100 a couple weeks ago, and you told me you didn't have it, right? But how do we have these uncomfortable conversations around money, and especially when you could be like maybe the first generation to kind of walk into some money or navigate certain spaces that your parents and your family members did?
It is a constant conversation a lot of clients are coming to me with. So most of my clients are first generation, breaking barriers, breaking generational ceilings that their parents and their parents have experienced. And it's hard for many reasons, because I think we first have to address the feeling that the client is coming in with. So there may be some guilt, some shame, there may be some feelings of isolation, because they are going into a space that is uncharted, that hasn't been modeled to them. And then not only that, they may have some guilt or shame about not being able to have people come with. And that's not to say they can't or they won't come with, but not everybody will be able to. So it's a very layered topic, but I do think the few things I would be able to kind of just gently say this may be of value is to first and foremost get a sense of what the understanding of finances is. So what I mean by that is, are we talking just money, where somebody is expecting, or where somebody may be saying like, hey, have they developed a relationship to depend on? And in many collectivist cultures, they do. family members or parents or people who have sacrificed in the past, daughters or sons or, other people who are not the household heads at that time, and then who kind of grow up to become head of household, they feel more inclined to want to give back to their families. They feel more inclined to want to support them in that way. I would say start to look at other ways that could be of support. So especially if financially that is this space where you're trying to have grow, you may have to have those uncomfortable conversations and say things like, certain things are sponsored for me, or certain things are given or allotted to me, and resources are provided to me when I'm already committed to traveling or when I'm already committed to certain things for work. And being able to say things like, I'm so sorry that right now I can't be of more support to you, but is there something else I can do by way of, can I offer to cook something for you? Can I offer to pay a bill if that's something that can be done, right? Like maybe that means, hey, I can't give you X amount of dollars, but I can help in this way. And you may have to identify what in this way looks like. You may also want to keep in mind, is this an enabling problem? Are you enabling in some way? And that's really hard for a lot of people who are really tied to their parents or to the people who are asking them for this support, because they feel like, well, if I made it, I kind of have to be able to support and offer these resources. You talked about how there is and sometimes can be a limited access of resources. But I also think it's being able to say, financially, I may not be able to help them long term. So there's another saying that if you teach a man, or if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day, but if you teach a man a fish, he eats for life. So what are you doing that you might be able to share some of those resources? Maybe you're saying, well, here's some resources of grants, or here's some communities that are offering rental assistance, or here's some resources that I've used to learn more about money and to learn more about being able to become financially aware of what that looks like. Because a lot of us think, well, rich people make money because they're rich, but we're actually, that story, that narrative is enabling and limiting us to be able to make moves. So sometimes financially, while you're moving forward, that might not be an option to be able to support. If it is, we need to start to look at what those boundaries look like in different ways. So this is a long-winded way of me saying it's gonna look a little different depending on what the circumstances are. But those are just a few things to bear in mind depending on where one falls in these different roles.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask, so with therapy, right? As a man, I know I'm not comfortable with it, or I wasn't comfortable with it, right? I don't know how Julius feels about it, but I know most men that I know are not comfortable with going to therapy or being known as that they go to therapy, right? And so, but however, I feel that women are more open to therapy than men. So why do you think this does this?
You think he's going to say being known as a person who goes to therapy, and I definitely feel similar as well.
Mm-hmm. So first, does this discrepancy exist to your knowledge? And if it does, why do you think that more women are open to going to therapy than men? Especially, I think, let me not say, I think it may be even more pronounced in the Black and brown community than the white community. I'm not sure about that, but I also have that feeling.
So I'm really excited to talk about some of the ways I've been working towards disrupting some of that and ways I've seen other people do it. So first and foremost, there's a lot of different networks online where they are targeting particular communities and spaces for people who are not easily able to access. Now, I think notoriously, the idea of therapy has been, well, that's something that I'm going to do if I'm, crazy, or that I'm going to do if like there's an issue, or that's something I'm going to do if I have money. The idea of it isn't seen as preventative. It's not seen hand in hand with being able to balance, be guided, and really see value in that before you even feel like you've hit the wall. We are coming from what's been modeled to us in many ways through TV, through research, and through academia, as it had and notoriously was disruptive, disregarding of, and inhumanizing of Black and brown people, because these were the folks that were being used in studies, that were being used to show us how to solve things for white folks. So I can understand the hesitation and that fear and that mistrust in the medical and the mental health profession. I would say, I think that part of really working to destigmatize mental health and really working to destigmatize therapy in the community means having these conversations. So am I going and having conversations about my own identity, particularly as a person of color, or am I allowing or just really kind of looking to easily access fruits and labors and services that can be afforded to me strictly through insurances? Because you're going to see a very different type of clientele reach you and access you if you're not looking to connect with your communities. And then the other things I think that are important are, so I've seen networks like Black Men Healing, Black Men Therapy, therapy for Latinx, therapy for BIPOC, Black Indigenous people of color. So you're going to see a lot of different spaces, you know, therapy for queer Black folk. Like there are a lot of particular nuanced resources or directories, rather, that was the word I was searching for, that are available. But I'm also being intentional to partner with them so that I can see and allow my services to be accessible for a variety of communities that may not have had access to me otherwise. I think another way to gently kind of disrupt that is to start to have conversations with more Black men who are Black men in therapy, or with more Latinos who are Latinos in therapy. So when I have men coming into my spaces and that I'm working with, and I'm first and foremost asking them, how did you hear about me? Because I want to expand that. Secondly, I'm asking them what has been their understanding of therapy, because what I am doing can be very different from what they experienced with someone else and a different therapist. Not all are created equal. So it's really important to start to have these moments before we even jump into working together of psychoeducation. How am I talking to you about your own experiences, your own understandings, and how do I push you when you get comfortable as a vessel to contribute? Remember those human needs I talked about. How are you contributing to now helping someone else become more informed and become a little bit more grounded? And I am usually, and thankfully I humbly say this, I have a lot of referrals from other clients because they're seeing the value in being able to say, yo, Jasmine helped me get it together and Jasmine helped me along my own journey. I want that for someone I love too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So one other thing, definitely wanted to make sure that we touched on, right? So we deal with youth, right? We deal with students and things of that nature. And one thing that has been I would say a huge push in the last few years has been these anti-bullying campaigns. And I'm gonna be honest, similar to the therapy thing, you know, I think I wrote it off as being just kind of ignorant, like, hey, why don't you, especially when they were talking about the cyberbullying, I was like, just turn off the phone or turn off or close your laptop. But somebody made a good point to me, as we've seen. I don't know if you all have been following this whole QAnon storyline where a lot of adults are getting caught up in these conspiracy theories online, and people get sucked into Facebook memes and ads. And these are adults, grown people with jobs and things like that. So somebody brought a point: if our adults are falling into these rabbit holes of the internet memes and internet storylines that are untrue, imagine a child who doesn't have those adult filters and can be able to kind of parse those things out from reality. So what would you say to parents and to students and to faculty as far as how to deal with maybe cyberbullying, where it's not an immediate threat, it's not a physical threat, but maybe kids are saying things about them online, or you know, Snapchat, TikTok, all these different things. And for a particular example, I remember I was watching something online, and apparently there's just this trend of like young Black boys and girls are kind of like going back and forth with each other regarding like not liking each other, not being internally just like Black boys do this, Black girls do this, and it's like this weird kind of gets real nasty type of thing. And I was just like, whoa, this is interesting. But it's coming from, I guess, them taking this seriously, and this is serious to them, the internet, this TikTok, this world. So, you know, I know I said a lot, but if you can, you know, find the through line, I trust you will.
As I'm hearing you talk about this, I'm reflecting back on my own experiences, and then I have a few different thoughts about this. So it's very different right now where there's a consistent access to be able to see what people know about you, don't like about you, are saying about you, because I won't say everyone, but a good majority are feeling inclined to share everything verbally, picture, live. Like there's just so much that can allow for somebody to express themselves. Very different from my generation growing up, where we didn't have the immediate access to see someone's story to know something we weren't at, or we didn't have this immediate access to see something globally broadcasted about ourselves through an anonymous lens or through somebody who is proudly now just saying it. So there's a real difference in what it looks like right now. And so the few things that come to mind before I address the idea of cyberbullying is this idea of artificial intelligence. So really understanding what that means. And sometimes we use language and we forget that there's so much behind it, and really getting that the way that, so there's a whole bunch of different docuseries on Netflix, but the first thing that comes to mind is if you're not paying for the service, then you are the service. Now, what that means is ads, how they're using your data. This is stuff that we as adults, and I said I don't have a TikTok for a reason, right? How they're using that data. So being able to use that to see what you like, what you don't like, the times that you're up, the people around you, the areas that you live in, the neighborhoods you live in, the things you purchase, all of that is going to be contributing to what is filtered on your timelines, and what is filtered and what you are being homogenized and really communionized to be consistently filtered with. So it's really easy to all of a sudden be in these little rabbit holes of these loops, because that's exactly what artificial intelligence does. If you haven't been as active, they send you these little notifications to send you, well, this is what your friend is doing, or so-and-so just joined this, or hey, here's an ad or something for something you looked at like 3 days ago. So it's that specific with being able to pull you in. And it's hard. Now imagine a young child or somebody who is not even aware that this is the way in which these screens, phones are reaching and pulling them in. Now we have to compile on that friends who are saying like, oh, did you check this out? Oh, have you seen that? And there's a FOMO, a fear of like, well, so all these other friends or all these other students or there's the other people telling me about this, now I gotta go check it out. So I'm a big proponent of being able to have quality time. I'm a big proponent of being able to put screens down. I'm a big proponent of being able to have face-to-face time, because we're missing that validation, that connection as humans. We're seeking it. And again, if we think back to finances, right, we're looking for other things to fill this void. And we're not having these quality moments together where we're playing a board game, or we're having conversations about something, or we're, for lack of better terms, learning how to get thick skin and learning how to be resistant in situations. Now, I'm not saying tolerate somebody being unsafe or at risk, but we really need to start talking about how we have conversations to ground ourselves in our own self-esteem and our own self-talk and our own sense of self, without it being validated by who likes us, what they're saying about us, what we're a part of. But that's not going to happen if I'm not taking the quality time to sit here and have these conversations, talk about my own experiences, have parents who I can say, hey, why don't you bring your kid over for a play date? Or why don't we go outside and, run at the park for a little bit? Or why don't we have a day where we take them out and, they'll go get some ice cream and, we talk a little bit as parents to get to know one another. I don't see that sense of community happening. So what you're seeing is kids are trying to raise or bully, I'll take the quotes out of that, but raise, bully. You're seeing a lot of kids being kids, and it's being amplified 10 times more by the feeling of everybody's globally seeing this, or it's being amplified by the feeling of stereotypes or stigmatizing one another, throwing rocks at each other. It's being amplified by feeling like we have to be in conflict with each other instead of recognizing how do we connect with one another. And we can't do that if other people aren't stepping in and modeling how to do that. And if we're only left to, for lack of better terms and pun, our own devices.
Thank you. That was very informative. And I know we're running into our time, so I want to do a quick speed round before we wrap up. And so just take a And I know this is probably the hardest speed round of anybody we're going to interview because your field is so complicated. So, and whatever you can do, please do with that. And thank you so much. So the first thing I would ask is speed round. How can somebody find a good therapist or counselor?
I'm smiling because that's so layered. Find a person who looks like you closely or similarly, and or more importantly, ask for a consultation so that you can ask them questions about the type of people they've helped, what you're particularly looking to work on in therapy, and get a sense of how successful they've been. So you really want to get an idea of, have they helped people who have been in similar situations like you, and how successful were they?
Thank you.
What are your thoughts on text therapy? Like, I've seen advertisements, I heard advertisements about people sending like their therapist text messages and you kind of respond back. Do you think is that effective in your opinion, or is that too broad of a question?
I would say let's think about what texting is used for. It is ideally and was supposed to be a way to communicate briefly. Now, if you were looking for a brief, quick access, that might be something that works for that type of individual. Ethically speaking, I think there's way too many problems with not being able to see you, not being able to know where you are, and not knowing who is on the other side of that phone, and not knowing who, as a therapist, what are they and where are they? Are they in a space where they are able to really concentrate on this, or are they multitasking? So I will authentically say, I'm not promoting the idea of text therapy. I think that's a very watered down notion of what could really be healing. Now, if it's in addition to something, again, I'm hesitant, but I would not recommend that be your front line.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great answer again. So I would say this is a topic, but what are 1 to 3 ways of dealing with stress?
Deep breathing is always, always, always important. So when we think about how our body functions off of cells, and how those cells work is oxygen and water. So if we take deep breaths, we can either energize or relax our bodies. So if we're able to do some deep breathing, that's a quick way. And I always tell my clients, we talk about different deep breathing techniques. You can find them on YouTube. There's a lot of different ones, but deep breathing is going to be a quick one you can do anywhere. You don't really have to be or have money or have a space, or you can do it anywhere. The other thing I would recommend is being able to find a few mantras that work for you. These can be said out loud. These can be said in your head. So mine is, I am fearless. And I ground myself with that in moments where I'm a little flustered, in moments where I feel overwhelmed, in moments where I'm like, I need to push myself. I am fearless. I am fearless. I am fearless. That is what I say to myself to motivate, move, and really ground myself. So those are just 2 quick ways that I think we could mitigate stress.
So I'm a TV fan and a movie fan, and oftentimes when the movies I think about, like The Departed, and then like the movie TV show Sopranos, and the movie Analyze That, they always have therapists and people in the mental health field depicted a certain way. What are your thoughts about therapy in the media? Or do you think is there any accurate descriptions that you've seen, or is it kind of all just Hollywood nonsense?
You're gonna get me started, and I'm not gonna go on the rant like that I can tend to go on for this, because I always say, anybody who knows me knows that I dislike how they portray therapists in the media, because it doesn't matter, find me any show, they will always be trying to sleep with the client. And that is the first thing you are not supposed to do. It is the first thing drilled into you at any level of therapy, at any level of your education, at any level of your training. Quality therapists don't sleep with their clients. So it really gets under my skin when I see how that is consistently portrayed in the media. It fantasizes and sexualizes what is an intimate relationships, but intimate relationships don't have to lead to sex. And they never should in therapy. So when I see that portrayed, I am consistently frustrated by it, and I'm just like, but I seldomly am seeing moments where therapists are able to be, and that is another factor of how we see them in our society, where they are able to be pictured, portrayed, or discussed in a way that is accurate with what we are doing. So I have yet to see that, and I am open to being told otherwise.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Julius, if you have any other questions, I want to be respectful to Jasmine's time. You can take my question if you do.
No, you go ahead.
No, okay. So once again, from Uplift Communities, from whoever's going to watch this, we thank you so much, Jasmine Santiago, future Dr. Jasmine Santiago. We thank you so much for your time. We're hoping this is the first of a series, things we can dive into. But we really want to thank you. We wish you the best. We're going to leave your details below. Also, people, please check out her podcast when it comes out. We're going to leave a link to her website so you can go check her out there, and then their Instagram page. She has a lot of great tips on her Instagram profile, so you can go find out more about that and apply that to your life. So thank you so much from Uplift Communities and whoever is going to watch.
Thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to more of these, and I hope you guys have a restful weekend.
Thank you. All right, so cut. We're going to also, I want to reshoot